are now at the eugenics stage of Trump morphing into Adolf Hitler. We are now at the they murder white people because it is in their genes stage. I am not exaggerating. I am just barely paraphrasing. Trump has now moved one step closer to eugenics, to classifying entire races and peoples and nationalities as genetically criminal, to fully embracing the nightmare insanity of Adolf Hitler, to ethnic cleansing and persecution of immigrants because he thinks they will commit murder or other crimes. As Politico described it, a blood libel. In an interview with the conservative bobble-head doll of commentators, Hugh Hewitt.
How about allowing people to come through an open border, 13,000 of which were murderers, many of them murdered far more than one person, and they're now happily living in the United States. You know, now a murderer, I believe this, it's in their genes, and we got a lot of bad genes in our country right now.
There can be no mitigation of that. There can be no excuses. There's no, well, he meant something else. It is literally where Hitler started. And it is full circle because eugenics was originally mistakenly posited as a way to speed up evolution, to improve overall health. Then in this country, after 1890 or so, it became an excuse to use prejudice and law to prevent certain people having children in a series of measures that included anti-miscegenation laws, laws that made interracial marriage illegal, measures that attracted the attention of Hitler and his earliest co-conspirators in Germany and formed the basis of their Nuremberg laws, which in turn formed the basis of the Holocaust. This is where it starts. Can't let the immigrants in. All the immigrants are murderers. Look, I made up a number. It's in their blood. We got a lot of bad genes in our country right now. Put them in camps. Trump spokesperson Catherine Leavitt lied that Trump was, quote, referring to murderers, not migrants, unquote, which I guess is why he had just referred to the border and twisted the number of immigrants. It's 13,099 non-citizens who have been convicted over the last several decades, the ones who are in jail, because he meant murderers, not migrants. Last night, though he was too terrified to be interviewed by 60 Minutes, he did talk to Laura Ingraham, and I can tell you without fear of contradiction that once there was nothing worse than talking to Laura Ingraham. But she has lost her fastball years ago, along with her ability to move all of her facial muscles. Trump didn't get quite as literal about eugenics with her, but he did say, quote, to women, I will keep you safe. I'm not going to allow prisoners to come out from Venezuela, the Congo, the Middle East, Yemen. I'm going to keep you safe. I'm not going to let them hurt you. Oh, and just in case you wanted more context and juxtaposition and the image of Hugh Hewitt mindlessly agreeing with this monster Trump, like Hewitt, the bobblehead doll, was in a car that had just vaulted a pothole, Trump moved on from eugenics to how Israel does not support him enough, and he quickly conflated Israel and all Jewish people and all American Jewish people, and with we got a lot of bad genes in our country right now. Having just said that, Trump then said this.
I think Israel has to do one thing. They have to get smart about Trump because they don't back me. I did more for Israel than anybody. I did more for the Jewish people than anybody. And it's not a reciprocal, as I say. Not reciprocal.
I think your numbers are rising with Jewish Americans. They may not say it out loud, but I think they're rising, Mr. President.
Well, we should have 100%, and I'll never hit that, but we should have 100%.
I don't know how much more he has to tell this country before even the coalition of the stupid and the hateful realizes that sooner rather than later, a Trump returned to power will attempt to stay in power beyond his expiration date by killing somebody they like, even a tech bro, or an Aryan with not enough Aryan blood in him, or a Nick Fuentes because, sorry, Nick, Fuentes is the same name as some of them immigrants he just vowed to protect the white women from. Or J.D. Vance, because Trump has a really bad loyalty record with vice presidents. A nice, clean electoral win by Kamala Harris will stave this off. More on how clean that win needs to be in a moment. But it will not end it, and I don't know what will end it. These are not people smart enough to understand that they can own dozens of guns each, and they still will not survive to see the end of the first minute of this civil war they hunger for, because they think life is some video game, and they cannot grasp the reality of gun versus tank. To wander off the news for a second, this is the coalition of the stupid and the hateful, and I was asked again recently about the core math here. How is this possible in the 21st century in this country, as sawed off and stupid as we can be? I can't exactly do the etymology of the thing, but my secret suspicion is we should have never stopped making the stupid kids repeat a year or two of school. If nothing else, that used to teach them that you could get caught. But the core math of what's in this coalition is not difficult. How could there be so many of them? I mean, if you consider the components of the coalition, what do you really need? What percentage of the country needs to be and to vote based on sheer, pure racism? Let's go low, 5%. Then what percentage of the country needs to be and to vote based on apocalyptic religious insanity? Just another 5%. Anti-Semitism? Yet just another 5%. Gun nuts, 5%. Misogynists, 5%. Homophobes, 5%. Economic failures looking for somebody else to blame, 5%. Absolutely functional, insane people like Trump, just 5%. I hate to tell you this, but we're already at 40%. All you need is 6% more, 6% rich people who realized they could stitch this coalition together and exploit these hatreds and fears and stupidities and 40%ers. And there you are. You are now at 46%. The latest number from the 538 average of polls, Trump is at 45.9%. For Christ's sake, he's underperforming. By the way, that is Donald Trump, coward, fraud, loser, feckless weakling, yellow-bellied candy ass, who agreed to, then backed out of the 60 Minutes interview last night. If Kamala Harris had backed out of the 60 Minutes interview last night, there would have been a special edition of the New York Times printed about it before 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Just about that one story. But he did do that interview with EUGENICS. EUGENICS, Anti-Semitism, Mr. President. Gotcha, Hewitt. It was Carlos Lozada in his book, A Brief Intellectual History of the Trump Era, who noted that in his Trump book in 2017, Hugh Hewitt insisted Trump was, quote, not likely to casually tempt the impeachment gods, would instead self-regulate, and thus rule, quote, inclusively, energetically, joyously. And that, in turn, would transform America into a, quote, booming, generous, open-handed republic of virtue. Just remember, Hugh Hewitt, bobble-head doll, only the head has fallen off. Kind of like Laura Ingraham, only they stitched it back on. Which lets me circle back to Hewitt's nonchalant response to eugenics and miscegenation and laws against certain races marrying each other, even though race is an artificial construct. You do know that last March, the Republican senator from Indiana, Mike Braun, went on at length to the media about how the Supreme Court was completely wrong to even rule on a case known as Loving versus Virginia. And that the issue that Loving versus Virginia should have been left to and should now be returned to the state. Loving versus Virginia, of course, was the case that wiped away the last state laws banning interracial marriage in 1967. After the understandable blowback to his remarks, Senator Braun rushed out a statement saying he'd misunderstood the line of questioning. And he condemns racism. And there's no question the Constitution prohibits discrimination of any kind based on race, even though that is exactly the platform Trump and the Republicans were running on in March and are running on now. Also, you know as well as I do that in my hypothetical math about the pie chart that is the coalition of the stupid and the hateful, the overlap number of stupid and homophobic and stupid and anti-Semitic and stupid and anything else is huge. And most of it is in Congress. I mean, Trumpists are now claiming Facebook is censoring a photo of Trump helping the victims in Georgia. He is shown in an AI image, handing them rolls of paper towels, presumably left over from his trip to Puerto Rico. In this image, he is in knee-high water in a suit, having presumably just tried and failed to walk on said water. Also, it's 5 days now since Cro-Magnon woman Marjorie Taylor Greene posted, yes, they can control the weather. It's ridiculous for anyone to lie and say it can't be done. It's just 2 days since Candace Taylor, Republican chairperson in the Georgia First, and that's Candace with a K and 2 S's, Candace Taylor wrote, the weather can and is being manipulated. Wake up. Stop being ignorant or plain stupid. There's no such thing as coincidences. That's coincidences with a C and 1 S. Now, Marge has gone back for a second bite, showing a 2013 clip from the CBS Morning News about maybe someday using lasers to try in some way to fend off the worst of climate change. And Marge writes, lasers. CBS 9 years ago talked about lasers controlling the weather. Okay, start with the fact that 2013 is 11 years ago, not 9. You moron. Also, Marge has gone back to her greatest hits, the Jewish space lasers. What I don't understand about this latest belief that they, presumably Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, maybe, can control the weather. What I don't understand isn't the fact that it implies that if weather is man-made, then climate change is certainly man-made. They can rationalize the difference between those things. Oh yeah, climate change is man-made and you're doing it deliberately to drive up the price of gasoline. Yeah, that's not what bothers me. Not even the idea that it has not occurred to them that if the Democrats can control the weather, they need to start being way nicer to Democrats. What I don't understand about all of it is this. You are saying the Democrats can control the weather, but Trump could not. That Trump was not smart enough to know how to control the weather. That Republicans are dumber. That Dementia J just couldn't find the on-off switch. Biden is sending hurricanes to screw up Republican early voting in Georgia, but Trumpy never got further than drawing on NOAA maps of hurricane paths with a Sharpie. You're saying the Democrats can control the weather, but Republicans can't? Well, damn, vote Democrat every time. Let's get more of those 75-degree light breeze, low humidity days, huh? I suggested here yesterday it was time to cancel all of Elon Musk's government contracts and reevaluate his immigration status because he was now actively interfering with the relief efforts post-hurricane and had turned Twitter X into a donation in kind to Trump's campaign. And there was some tisking that we shouldn't go that far and interfere in private business and shut up. Washington Post, quote, Republicans backing Donald Trump are threatening Deloitte, a consulting firm that is one of the federal government's largest business partners, with the loss of billions of dollars in contracts because an employee shared messages from 2020 in which J.D. Vance, now the GOP vice presidential nominee, criticized the then president's record. On September 27th, Donald Trump Jr., he's Uday if you're keeping track, exposed the employee's name and photograph to millions of people on social media, writing, "Maybe it's time for the GOP to end Deloitte's taxpayer-funded gravy train." Others, including Vance's chief spokesman and a Republican senator, circulated Trump Jr.'s comments, and the conservative website Breitbart published a story naming the man and highlighting his job. So save me the tisking on Musk. The good Musk news is his prancing around like a strung-out idiot on stage who needed a large and was wearing a small shirt in Wisconsin Saturday. That went so well, he's going to campaign for Trump in Pennsylvania between now and Election Day. Musk's net favorability score is minus 11. I mean, even J.D. Vance is only minus 10. But Musk thinks he can be president someday, or if Trump gets elected, he can be de facto president with Trump as the mere spokesmodel. Good. Send more Elon Musk. Tamp down that whole Republicans are weirdos vibe. Boost the Republicans are evil, incompetent billionaire weirdos vibe. To that end, Musk is trying to bribe voters. Sign our petition to support the Constitution. Also earn $47 for every person you refer to sign the petition if they're in a swing state. Easy money. The, quote, petition he is referring to pledges support for the First and Second Amendments, and the rest of it is just personal information you have to fill in. It's a registration. He's buying swing state voter details in order to micro-target them with advertisements in the last month of the campaign, like the Russians did with Facebook in 2016. Perhaps more important to the victims of this scam, $47 from Elon Musk. You're getting that in advance, right? Possibly the best pollsters out there, TIPP, T-I-P-P, polling for a group of called Issues and Insights, back with Harris 49, Trump 46. Research company polling based in Vancouver. Vancouver? Has Harris by 4 in polling, it says, closed Sunday. The 538 average of polls is at Harris 48.5, Trump just under 46. And more importantly, there are two pieces of polling insight that are not predictions and aren't likely voters and aren't registered voters and aren't margins of error, but are about one weird trick that makes all the polls different from one another. Nate Cohn of the New York Times wrote something in which he says the polls which are weighted in favor of how respondents think they voted last time, that one detail is the difference among all the polls. If you put more and more of these people in your poll will look more and more like how everybody did vote last time. It becomes confirmation bias. Cohn says the Times doesn't do that, which is why their polls are so out there by themselves. That's why. I'm not sure I'm buying any of that. And he gets so deep in the weeds, it would be impossible for me to recap his piece for you here in under 4 hours. But if you have time, read it, at least for one reason. Cohn confesses, without realizing it, that poll numbers are about 1/4 what respondents actually tell pollsters, and about 3/4 which of these numbers pollsters choose to include and which they don't. As to the other bit of insight, Nate Silver reminds me why I was the one who first put him on TV to talk political numbers, not just baseball stats, because when he sticks to the numbers, he's still good. He has now produced an easy-to-read chart that correlates how much Harris or Trump would have to win the popular vote by in order to win the Electoral College vote. The gist? Trump is still the favorite to win if he wins the popular vote by any margin, but he's also the favorite to win if he loses the popular vote by anything up to 3%. Not guaranteed, but Silver says a Harris popular win by 1% would still give Trump an 89% chance in the Electoral College. Harris, by anywhere from 1 point to 2 points, Trump is still a 69% favorite. 2 points to 3 points for Harris, nearly 38% chance of Trump winning in the EC. Above 3%, Trump begins to expire. 13.5% Trump in the 3 to 4 range. Harris wins by 4% or 4.1% or 4.2, whatever. Her Electoral College chance is 96.6%. If she gets to 5 points in the popular vote, her chances in the Electoral College rise above 99%. If she gets to 6 points, it's 99.9% hers. 99.9%. That is still too effing close. Also of interest here, hey, they convicted the guy who actually illegally shot those geese on the golf course in Springfield, Ohio. His name is Brian Comer. Hey, wait a minute. Comer? Like Representative Comer? Well, that's a coinky-dinky. Also, guess where Brian Comer is not from? That's right. He's not from Haiti. He's from Springfield, effing Ohio. And here's another shock. Brian Comer, geese shooter, is a pasty white guy. That's next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Still ahead of us on this edition of Countdown, well, Howard Stern, the latest stop on the Kamala Harris interview blitz that the political media will not acknowledge is a political blitz. Because look, if anybody can interview presidential candidates, if Howard can, if Alex Cooper can, and if they can interview them insightfully, what do you need political media for? I mean, how did they not see this coming? The best political interviewer of the last half century was David Letterman, not David Muir or David Brinkley. Anyway, Howard is in the news, and so is the last half century, because I literally met Howard Stern 50 years ago. Might have been 50 years ago today. It certainly is either 50 years ago this month or 50 years ago next month. And it completely redirected the course of my life. 20-year-old Howard meets 15-year-old Keith. Next in Things I Promised Not to Tell. First, there are still more new idiots to talk about. The daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's Waste Poisons in the World. The Bronze Worst J.D. Vance. Anybody remember the Republicans' favorite lie from 2 weeks ago? Not the last one this week about the FEMA response and $750. Not the one the week before about Trump saving Obamacare. Not the last couple. The one 3 ago. Three about the immigrants killing pets and geese on the golf courses of Springfield, Ohio. Yeah, that one. The most important thing in the world for J.D. Vance and his fellow Nazis for about 10 days. The one that inspired death threats against a MAGA guy who voted for Trump twice but spoke up for his Haitian immigrant employees. And it got so bad the man had to buy his 14-year-old daughter a Luger for self-defense. There's been an arrest in the case. Unbelievably, no, it's neither Vance nor Trump. It's Brian Comer. Because here's a real surprise. Brian Comer was a groundskeeper at Rocky Lakes Golf Course, the Carl Spackler of Springfield, Ohio, and he illegally shot and killed 2 geese on the golf course grounds. He has pleaded guilty and was ordered to pay a fine of $200 and court costs. He shot geese. By the way, in case you're wondering, Brian is not an immigrant, not from Haiti, not a person of color. He's a 64-year-old white dude who did not have a license to shoot the geese and claimed that he did. And he and Vance and Trump helped turn an example of animal cruelty and breaking a minor law into a preview of the race war that Trump and Vance want against all the brown folks here so they can get elected. The runner-up worser, Jake Tapper from CNN, Sports Illustrated noted that a New York Mets player had made history during a 7-6 loss to the Philadelphia Phillies in a baseball playoff game the other night. Jake Tapper, a Phillies fan, good luck, retweeted the note, adding, "That's great. What was the final score?" What was the final score, Jake? The final score was 7-6, Phillies over the Mets. But here's an idea. Somebody should go on Jake Tapper's newscast on CNN and insist that the Mets actually won that game, that in reality they lost, and then, sticking to CNN policy, Jake would not be allowed to fact-check them. Yeah. But our winner, the worst, Frank Saravelli of the hockey site The Daily Faceoff. Every writer covering every sport makes predictions every year at the start of every new season. I did it. I did it so long ago I didn't have to shave every day when I did it first. I may yet do it again, who knows? At a certain point, as fresh as you try to make it on season preview number 38 of your life, you do go into autopilot, maybe for only a paragraph here or there. And as we all know, going into autopilot is inevitable, and I guess it's okay unless your autopilot is broken. One of Mr. Saravelli's 32 bold predictions for the upcoming National Hockey League season, number 14, with a little help from Johnny Gaudreau, the Columbus Blue Jackets will win the 2025 draft lottery. It's the only consolation prize on a brutal year, but hope and help is on the way. Unquote. Johnny Gaudreau, Johnny Hockey as he was known, was a beloved star with the Columbus Blue Jackets until August 29th, when he and his brother Matthew, a star at Boston College, were killed by a drunk driver while they were cycling, while they were home for the wedding of their sister. And this idiot Saravelli tried to turn it into some sort of plus for Gaudreau's still grieving team and franchise and coaches and teammates and fans, because somehow, sure, he's dead, but you'll be compensated that by the universe by winning the lottery for the first pick in a goddamned meaningless player draft. When much of the hockey world responded with outrage to what Saravelli wrote, Saravelli thought the problem was that he hadn't explained why Gaudreau's death would give them the first pick in Columbus. He edited his forecast with no apology or even note that he'd made a change. 14 now reads, 14, with a little help from Gaudreau in heaven, the Columbus Blue Jackets will win the 2025 draft lottery. Oh, that's much better. The late Johnny Gaudreau will fix the draft for his old team from heaven, and everybody will be happy again, despite the tragedy and the drunk driver, because hockey draft choices. Pro tip, Frank, delete your column, delete your site, scrub your online history. Go and atone with monks in Tibet or something, then maybe come back in a year or 2 or 20 and start all over again. Frank, by the way, he wrote, "It's time, the annual tradition of making a fool of myself before another season. Please bookmark and ridicule appropriately." Well, at least you got that part right. Saravelli, today's worst person in the world. was 15 years old and just starting my college visits. My dad and I flew the very inexpensive Eastern Shuttle to Boston and Commonwealth Avenue and the Boston University School of Public Communications, which had surprised us by not only offering me early admission when I had not requested it, but which upon arrival knocked us over by saying they wanted to offer me a merit scholarship, a free ride, all expenses paid. To be fair, I was the editor of the high school newspaper, an editor of the yearbook, sports director of the radio station. I'd been in the drama group. I had researched and had published a baseball reference book earlier that year, and I was the associate editor of the first guide to sports memorabilia, and I had an internship lined up in the public relations department of the Boston Celtics. So the admission was not much of a surprise. The merit scholarship? Let me tell you, the merit scholarship appealed fantastically to my father. My dad had already been socked for 5 years of private school because I was too bored to do well in public school, and now he was facing college money. This was new territory in Olbermann land. Nobody that we knew of on either side of my family had graduated from a 4-year college since one of my great-grandfathers got a degree in wrought iron design round about 1885. And my dad had been offered a scholarship at a top architecture college and could not afford to take it. They were so poor, he had to go to work right out of high school, or his brother had no chance of finishing high school. Free college? At a good one in the field his son wanted to go into? Dad liked this very much. The tour of what was then called the School of Public Communications went well. It was early fall, and there are a few places in the Northeast that do not look their best in early fall. We were in the middle of Boston, but there were trees. It was far from home, but it was down the block from Fenway Park. I think the admissions director took us into the main studio of the Boston University AM station and introduced us to the disc jockey, or pointed at him or something, and then the admissions director left. He must have, because what followed in the studio was not what that guy wanted me to hear. The disc jockey was a gaunt, kind of greasy-looking kid with hair down to the floor and the attitude of an inquisitor working on too little sleep. He claimed to be a junior. To me, he looked to be about 30 years old. We were not introduced by name, or if we were, I had forgotten his by the time he finished saying it. Where you from, kid? Westchester, I told him. Oh, yeah? I'm from Long Island. You got a problem with that? I said, no, I had relatives on Long Island. Good answer. So you're applying here? I told him about the merit scholarship. Ah, la-di-da. Some kind of phenom? I explained about the Celtics internship. Listen, kid, you sound like you know what you're doing, so don't make the same mistake I did. The first 2 years, you don't get to take any radio or TV classes, just general studies. I suddenly remembered having read that. I asked him, what was the point of just repeating high school for 2 more years? Exactly, okay, you get it. And what's worse, the grad students, they control the real radio station. It's like organized crime here. See, this radio station, this crap shack, you can only hear this in the dorms. And it took me 3 years just to get 2 shows a week here. Tuesdays and Thursdays, middays. Nobody's in the dorms middays. Total waste of my time and my exceptional talent. And so far, the classes are crap. So maybe what you do is keep the internship, but ditch the scholarship. I think it was at this point that my father said we had to get to the airport. He did not want me hearing more about ditching the scholarship. My college admissions strategy had been this. Maybe just go to the best school and let the radio and TV stuff come to me. But maybe go to a school that was really good in radio and TV and let the education just come to me. Then there was this Celtics internship, confusing things even further, and now the offer of the free ride from BU. So my radio TV schools were BU with Ithaca College as the safety, and my good schools were, forgive me, Harvard and Cornell as my safety, which is kind of unfair because my graduating class in high school had like 70 kids in it, and 4 of us were applying to Harvard, and 2 of them had 4.0 grade averages dating back to the womb, and I didn't, and my only chance they were going to accept me would be because I would be only 16. BU was obviously a yes if they were going to pay for it. Ithaca was a yes, but I got a tour of the dorms, and the elevators were full of trash. This is not a euphemism. This is not a value judgment. The elevators had ankle-high garbage in them. Cornell had a communications program, but I couldn't find out much about it, and I couldn't find out much about the radio station, except that it was not dominated by grad students. Plus, Cornell had accepted me, and as I expected, Harvard had not. And not that this still bothers me, but I remember that the letter was dated April 9th, 1975, and it was waiting for me in the mail when I got back from the Yankees home opener on the afternoon of Saturday, April 12th. Not that it still bothers me. Frickin' Harvard. So I had like a week to choose between Cornell and a scholarship to BU, and then somewhere I read a story about how they had found a kid dead in the hallway of that big freshman dorm we'd seen in Boston, and I told my dad I would thus never be comfortable there, and of course that was just crap. I kept flashing back to what the kid on the carrier current BU radio station with the stringy hair down to the floor told me, and I kept thinking, I'm not going to get any radio experience until late 1977. I just couldn't do it. And so I went to Cornell, and Dad started writing checks. And before I get to the punchline of this one, I have to mention, sophomore year, my dad drives me and my stuff up to Cornell, and he gets turned around looking for my dorm, and I say, yeah, the good part is where we are. If you take the next left, we'll be at the Cornell Architecture School, and... Whereupon he cuts me off and says, yeah, I know, it's Rand Hall, next left, second building on the right. I said, how do you know that? He says, remember I told you I was offered an architecture scholarship, but I couldn't take it because we didn't have any money, and your Uncle Bill wouldn't have been able to finish high school? And I said, yeah. And he said, yeah, the scholarship was to here. During all the time I wrestled with which colleges to apply to, let alone which one to go to, my dad never told me that. Probably the first time I had respect for him as one sort of adult to another. And I still do. Anyway, 15 years later, or whenever it was, I'm doing sports in Los Angeles, and late on a Saturday night, this syndicated version of some New York radio shock jock show comes on the TV, and I look, and it's the Don't Make My Mistake kid from Boston University in 1974. His name turns out to be Howard Stern, and he looks exactly the same. Years pass, and for some reason, when Howard Stern leaves AM radio to put his show on satellite, the first day of the satellite show, he invites people from TV networks and newspapers to cover the big switch, and from NBC, he asks for me. So I get up, and I go, and I get a moment with him, and I do a shtick for my MSNBC show, and then I say, listen, we've met. And he says, nah. And I tell him, and he says, I don't remember meeting you. And I say, of course not. I was 15 and we were not really introduced. And I mean, I had no idea it was you until I saw you on TV. And he says, it can't be. And I say, when you were a junior at BU, didn't you do only Tuesday and Thursday middays on the carrier current station? And weren't you already bitter about it and bitter about management? And he says, yeah, but I don't remember meeting you. And so this was January 2006. And every time our paths have crossed since, we basically have repeated this conversation live or by text or whatever. And he insists, yeah, but I don't remember meeting you. And I have to explain that we didn't meet by name, and I was much shorter then. And he says something like, how would that work? And sooner or later, I just give up. But it was him. I met Howard Stern in 1974 when he was 20 years old and I was 15, and he personally talked me out of going to Boston University. Thank you, Howard. And nicely as things worked out with Cornell, and the best radio training ground in the country that Cornell contained and contains, yes, I'm still bitter about Harvard. You still insist it wasn't me. Because you didn't remember my name. Because I never mentioned my name. And I was shorter. Done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. We're now back to 5 episodes a week, posting nightly just after midnight Eastern. Once again, there is a Monday countdown. And please send this podcast to somebody who does not know that they need to listen, but should. Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel, the musical directors of Countdown, arranged, produced, and performed most of our music. Mr. Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards. Mr. Ray was on the guitars, bass, and drums, and it was produced by TKO Brothers. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by the best baseball stadium organist ever, Nancy Faust. The sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc. Other music arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. My announcer today was my friend Jonathan Banks. Everything else was, as usual, pretty much my fault. So that's Countdown for today, 4 weeks until the 2024 presidential election, the 1,372nd day since convicted felon drooling J. Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Use the election. Use the mental health system. Use presidential immunity if we have to resort to that to keep him from doing it again while we still can. The next scheduled countdown is tomorrow. Bulletins as the news requires. Until the next one, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.